Now that we've discussed the need to start telling it like it is in the video on concept number 1, it's time for us to take things a step further. Let's start with another question. What do you think is the number one thing that prevents us from achieving our desired goals? That problem is having a short-term mindset. Face it, America, and most of the world, for that matter, is all about the short term. We want what we want, and we want it now. We've become a society that all too often is no longer willing to put in the hard work necessary to make things happen. I'll give you an example from my life. I used to be massively obese, and I constantly wanted loads and loads and loads of delicious food that made me feel great in the short term while I was eating it. The only problem is that eating all that food made me more and more and more unhealthy, and it made me not want to exercise. In the short term, which is while I was eating it, that food made me feel great. But in the long term, it made me feel miserable. As I felt increasingly miserable, I continued to eat more and more delicious food that once again made me feel better in the short term, but continued to make me feel even worse in the long term. In essence, the continued satisfaction of my short-term desires was mortgaging my long-term future. I was trapped in what I call a vicious short cycle from which I couldn't escape. In essence, I was focusing almost all of my attention on my desire for short-term gratification and almost none of my attention on my long-term health. That's how I ballooned up to 367 pounds. Why do we, as hopefully rational human beings, do things that mortgage our long-term future? 3 reasons. Reason number 1, we live in a world that encourages us to focus on our short-term pleasures by constantly consuming stuff. Just think about it. The more we consume, the more money companies make off us. And I'm not just talking about food. Clothing companies make money by selling us clothes we want, but don't necessarily need. The car companies make money by selling us new cars we want, but don't necessarily need. Advertisers are telling us to buy the latest smartphone, the latest computers, the latest TVs. Do we need them? Drug companies are telling us that if we just take their pill, it will solve all our health problems. The list goes on and on and on. And it's all done in the name of making money. America and much of the world is a consumption-based society. Almost everything we are exposed to encourages us to consume larger and larger quantities of stuff. Reason number 2, we live in a world that encourages us to always be happy. The phrase, no pain, no gain, that meant so much to the previous generations means little or nothing to today's average American. Reason number 3, our society is constantly bombarded with instant solutions that are being sold to us. Got a question? Ask Alexa, or Siri, or Google. Want some groceries delivered for dinner tonight? Try Amazon. Many of our daily tasks have been made easy for us. Too easy. We've gone from a society that praised hard work to one that avoided it whenever possible. How did this happen? Honestly, it doesn't matter. All that matters is now that we're aware of the problem, what are we going to do about it? Let's see what the Way of Excellence system has to say about it. Until number 2 states that until we adopt long-term thinking and start focusing less on short-term gratification, we will never achieve our maximum potential and evolve as a species. What does that mean? It means that until we start making some short-term sacrifices and start focusing more on the long term, we're never going to fulfill our maximum potential. We're never going to get to where we want to be. In life, you're never going to come across a greater adversary than your own potential. If you come close to fulfilling your potential, you're going to feel fantastic. If you don't fulfill your potential, you're going to be miserable. Realizing that I was wasting my potential is what got me to start making the necessary permanent changes in my life back in early 2009. I have a question for you. Are you a parent or a grandparent? Assuming you are, I'd like to ask you another question. As your children or grandchildren were growing up, did you make any short-term sacrifices so that your children or grandchildren could lead better lives in the long term? Of course you did. If you're not a parent or grandparent, think of your own parents. Did they make any short-term sacrifices so that you could lead a better life in the long term? Of course they did. Law number 2 states, repeated short-term discipline brings long-term rewards. Consequently, one must place reasonable limits on short-term pleasures with the understanding long-term benefits will be the result. There's no way around it. If you want to have a better long term, you're going to sometimes have to make sacrifices in the short term. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying you should give up 100% of your short-term pleasures. I'm not saying that you should never have any fun. I'm simply suggesting that you should sometimes reduce your short-term pleasures with the understanding that you're going to have a better long term as a result. By incorporating law number 2, the law of the long term, into our lives, we will be creating a society based upon principles that are sustainable over the long term, as opposed to an unsustainable society that cannot hope to last. In other words, if we wake up, take a look around, and recognize that a few short-term changes here and there can lead to massive long-term benefits, and then begin adjusting our future actions accordingly, a better future awaits us. Just think, the computers in our pockets are way more powerful than the computers that sent man to the moon. Yet, what do we use them for? Taking pictures of our food and watching cat videos. I think we can do better than that. I know we can do better than that. We should do better than that. We need to watch less and do more. We need to start avoiding distractions. We need to learn to eat for the long term. We need to get our butts off the couch. But as we discussed in concept number 1, you don't have to be perfect. Just work on getting better. Don't compare yourself to others. The only person you should compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. And as long as the person you are today is even the tiniest bit better than the person you were yesterday, you should consider yourself to be a success. The Indian philosopher Rabindranath Tagore said, "Everything comes to us that belongs to us if we create the capacity to receive it." When you stop focusing on your short-term pleasures and start working on improving yourself in the long term, that's exactly what you're doing. You're creating the capacity to receive all the fantastic, wonderful things you truly want in life. Better health, better relationships, better finances, a more balanced life, inner peace and contentment, a better world. Let's get together and let's make this happen. If you like these videos, please be sure to click the subscribe so you can subscribe to our channel, and be sure to click the notification bell so that you'll be notified when we post each and every video on Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays.